to live in, and a concerning one indeed. Professor, moving on to an article you wrote on artificial intelligence. You wrote it the last couple of weeks. And it got me thinking on your thoughts on, of course, you write them thoroughly in that article, but in the future, and which is moving very rapidly for many of us, including my generation, who has to transition and adapt to a world where AI can come to get all of our jobs. So what are your thoughts for our listeners who haven't read your article on ChatGPT, on artificial intelligence, on its dangers in terms of not only taking jobs, but also building a more dangerous world for all of us and its potential threats?
Well, we should first recognize that a huge amount of the discussion about chatbot and other such devices is totally groundless. These have nothing to do. They tell us these systems are designed in such a way that in principle, they can tell us nothing about language, about learning, about intelligence, about thought, nothing. They do some very there's a lot of sophisticated programming, but basically what it comes down to is sophisticated high-tech plagiarism. That's in a certain way. I mean, you have a computer. When you're typing a letter, you get hints about what the next word ought to be, autofill. Well, this is glorified autofill. It's ways of making a good guess about what your next word ought to be in a sequence of words. If you do this with an astronomical database, extraordinary database, supercomputers, a couple of billion parameters, string it together, you get something that looks pretty much like normal language use. The programming is quite sophisticated, so you don't choose the most probable next word, because if you did that, it would look kind of bland and not very interesting. So you pick a lower probability word, so it's a little bit surprising. Gives the false impression that something's happening. But there's conceivably somebody will come up with a constructive purpose. So far, there's none, but it's very dangerous in many ways. And not so much taking jobs, maybe in the long term, but I don't think that's a major thing. It's dangerous in other ways. For one thing, people take it seriously. There are cases. People think they're talking. It's like asking questions of these devices that what are they called?
Alexa?
Alexa. You ask Alexa, should I leave my wife or something? Alexa says something or other. Well, if it's Alexa, you don't pay that much attention. If it's a chatbot, you do pay attention. And there are already documented cases of people getting deluded into believing these things are real. Thomas Friedman had an article in the New York Times about it, in which he wasn't criticizing it, he was accepting it. He was saying, oh my God, it's Promethean, the greatest advance ever. Well, people fall for it, cause them a lot of problems. It's a terrific technique of defamation and disinformation. And that's already being used, especially when you combine it with artificial image creation, which is not very hard. You get things, you can put somebody's name under it, fantastic defamation, massive ways of disinformation. As soon as it gets with bots and organized societies behind it, it'll be a flood. All of this can be extremely dangerous. No scientific interest, no intellectual interest, but it could have major effects. It's conceivable that it might replace some work, like maybe routine coding or something like that. But it's a very threatening, dangerous development.
Professor, yeah, It's a counter idea, counter argument to all of the hype that we're